Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the author series on the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Robert Wood Anderson. Robert is the author of psychological thrillers, including the Resurrection Runner series, The Final Score, and Father Was a Soldier Boy. His books are known for plummeting the protagonist and the reader through one trapdoor after the next to ever more abysmal, and that's pretty strong there, abysmal levels of knowledge. Robert, welcome to the Success Insight podcast and the author series.
Thank you, Howard, very much. Very pleased to be here.
Fantastic. I know you and I have had our own unique journey of trying to eventually get together, and I'm glad we have finally been able to get you on the show to talk about your work. And when we first started off we just called ourselves Success Insight Podcast. We had a lot of book authors, and I never knew there was this huge genre of psychological thrillers and also zombie apocalypse, by the way.
Yes. True.
And I love, the psychological thrillers. And as I was sharing, at the end of the year, it's nice to sit down and just have some enjoyable reading. And you've got some great books out there, and I would love to get into the books, especially the last two that you produced, The Resurrection Runner, which was in 2020, and now The Reluctant Runner in 2021. But before we do that, I always love if my guest would share a little bit about your background, because I'm always interested in how you got into this profession. Tell us a little bit of like a 30,000-foot view of your journey.
I was born in Washington, D.C. during the Second World War, between the two sides of the war, Europe and Japan. And then when my father, who was in the military then, moved back to Lincoln, Nebraska, of course, I came with them. And we had a wonderful life here in Lincoln. And my mom passed away when I was very young, and my dad remarried, and we suddenly had a large family. In high school, things were changing rapidly, and as I recall, girls were carrying lead in their purses so they could have fights. At least that's what I heard.
Really?
It scared me a little bit.
Okay.
But I was a bit of a hermit. So what did I do? I decided I would ask, and I received a trip to a boarding school, a military religious boarding school in Minnesota. And I spent 4 years there and enjoyed it. And came out, I think, as I mentioned in a note I sent to you, full of myself, essentially. Shortly thereafter, our family moved to Los Angeles. My father had been in the business of theatrical productions, and I was full of hope and thinking I would become a star somehow. And in fact, that did happen in a way, a shooting star, shall I say?
Okay.
And I went to college. I didn't pay much attention to it. I got out. I started working at IBM, loading trucks for the publications department. My wife and we got married shortly after I got out of school, and it wasn't 6 months, and I was working with a group of kids and a choreographer and a musical guy who was putting together a group called the Doodletown Pipers. If you Google it, you might be able to find it. We were around for 3 years, and then we disbanded, and another group of people took over for some time. But during that time, we traveled a good 9 months out of the year. My wife at home with a baby. This wasn't the best thing in the world, but that went on. And thing is that I came back, and that, it, as I say, dissolved. And we finally got to the point that I was not doing too well, and a brother-in-law and sister-in-law in Omaha, my wife's family, said, why don't you come back here and get your act together? Which I did. I went to work at Boys Town, and that certainly helped. And I went to school at University of Nebraska at Omaha, and actually became a greasy grind and loved studying, and came out pretty well at the end.
I love this part of the story, and I want you to kind of continue it at this level. But a couple of things kind of dawned on me as you were sharing it. One, in the loading docks, in your notes, you said, blue suit, white shirt, and a red tie.
Yes.
and I've worked for firms like that. There was a Texas firm, probably you have heard of it, EDS at the time.
Yes.
Electronic. And, it could be 100 degrees out and you were still wearing a gray suit, white shirt, and a red tie. their culture is one size. Everybody needs to fit this.
Yes, absolutely.
No individuality. And how did you end up with these guys or other kids, so to speak? That maybe there were women in a group too, the Doodletown Pipers. How did you get started with them? Where did you meet them?
I was singing in a large group called the Young Americans. It was a no pay group, and we went around LA putting on performances. And one of the people in there, I think was the musical director, decided to get something together and get a little more professional. So we did that. We were 36 to begin with, and the Young Americans and the Doodletown Pipers are not really associated with them. However, I was one of the first that they wanted to talk to, and a couple other kids were there. Kids, I would say I was probably the oldest one at the time, being about 22, 21. And, the rest of them were a little bit younger, but such great talent. I mean, there were some wonderful people. We rehearsed for several months, and we got our first show in Reno.
Okay.
On stage with George Burns.
Oh my!
Oh yeah. How do you start better?
Yeah, I mean that. By the way, that's a story you can continue to share as you're sharing today for the rest of your life. I knew.
Yes, and we met. Of course, we met so many people. We were being on the road. We were on the stage with Nancy Wilson, traveling for years and years, and on Ed Sullivan.
Oh wow!
Many times, and we had a summer replacement show called Our Place with the Muppets, where I met Jim Henson and Frank Oz, and good friends. And we made a lot of friendships, met a lot of really famous and wonderful entertainers. It was a good time.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. For our listeners, Robert shared that he was a little bit nervous coming on this podcast. So this is me giving you a little bit of a nudge here, Robert, by the way, is my God, you were on stage with, performing. It's like this, coming on an interview like this should be a walk in the park for you. Okay.
Oh, it is. I can tell you. Sure. Yeah. Howard, come on.
All right. So you got to Nebraska, you're married, you got to Nebraska, you kind of settled in. When did the writing bug kind of catch up to you? Is this something maybe you had done prior, or did this writing bug kind of begin, when you kind of came back to the Midwest, settled in, and had a nice life going forward? When did that start?
Well, it actually happened just shortly after, because after graduation, I accepted a position teaching at Whittier College for a couple of years, and we moved back to Southern California. And let's say we parted ways. I was not happy with teaching at all. And we moved to Northern California, where I changed careers completely. But it was then that I was without work for a while and just started writing.
Okay.
And my wife and I actually started writing a book together, which was a immense manuscript, which is still unfinished. We may get back to that soon.
Yeah, there's a goal for you.
Yes, absolutely. But I wrote Resurrection Runner just after that. So it's many years ago, frankly, when I wrote the first draft, 87.
Wow. Okay.
So, I went through this period of 30, almost 40 years working in the nursery business in California, which is a round the clock, 365 days a year program. Mm-hmm. I was head of sales, international sales of the largest bedding plant company in the world. And that ended. I took another position with another nursery. Then I did another stint. And when I finally said I'm done and retired, I had a whole bunch of camera equipment, and I've been taking pictures since the Doodletown Piper days. And I said, I can't sit still. I'm going to become a professional photographer.
Okay.
I spent about a year and a half planning, doing, and realizing that was not my way, and that was not the path. I started reading the manuscripts I'd written before, and I said, to myself, of course, and my wife, I said, look, there's something here. So I picked it up and took Resurrection Runner, which I thought was the best piece.
Okay.
And spent about 3 months rewriting it and getting it together again. And gosh, I got it published.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah. And it's a series, and it's at least 3, because I'm working on the 3rd part right now.
Okay.
It's to me an interesting transition. Over those years, many things have changed. And of course, the book is written in the past.
Right.
With that perspective. And the Revenant Runner is the 3rd one, but the 2nd one is written today for 2021. And the first book is a book of growth and coming out for a person who has really no brain. He is an agent for a federal agency, and they have used him to experiment on making him an assassin who has no history except what they put into his head from time to time.
It sounds like the Bourne series, but I know it's not.
A little bit. It's a little bit. Yeah, it turns into Dean Koontz a bit. It's
Okay.
certainly Manchurian Candidate.
Well, this actually begs a question. As you were creating this manuscript, where was your influence coming from? I am not a writer. I love the podcasting because I could, interview all day. I will pass out, but I can do it. But where does the ideas that go into this manuscript, what is the influence for you? And again, you started a while ago. So where did those ideas come from? I mean, is it newspapers, other movies, TV? Where did that come from?
Well, some of it came from books. I mentioned Condon's book, The Manchurian Candidate, which became a pretty famous movie.
Sure.
Solzhenitsyn has always been somebody important to me, and so his Gulag Archipelago was stunning. And I listened to talk radio in its infancy. And out of San Francisco, KSFO, I took a bit of a conservative change in my head. And so my mind started working on, so we might call it conspiracy theories, but kind of maybe comes to play. So
Yeah.
we'll see. So that's kind of how it began.
Okay. And as you are creating this manuscript, the protagonist, I mean, so he's been a part of a government organization. I mean, he's probably the formula, has no family or they're all deceased and is created for one purpose. And how did you begin to evolve what you were going to put this individual through and the people that he came across?
Well, I was working on some keyboard of some kind because computers were just getting personal. So
It's called a typewriter, Robert. It was a typewriter.
Oh, I forgot. Yes.
Forgot about those.
Yeah. So we started working on and it was a typewriter actually. So I didn't know anything about plotting. I didn't know about anything like that. I just said I got something to write. So I sat down and started writing it, and things started coming, and it changed. And I learned fairly rapidly that whatever I had in my head might change because of what got into my head later as the writing came out. And so even today, though I try to plot as much as I can and work as out the story as much as possible before I even start. It evolves because of itself. It's not just serendipity, but it is certainly all sorts of ideas that come from what can possibly happen, what could happen next. And so the trilogy as it is now, it does that. In the beginning, the Resurrection Runner is about one guy and his fight to get his mind back once he figures out that he doesn't have a head of his own. And then the next one is one where this character, a few years have passed, and he starts having interactions with other people, some people from the past that he thought were dead. And so there are relationships that develop there that you really don't find in the first book. And as the third book, which is called The Revenant Runner, at this time, as it progresses, there are some mystical sorts of things that happen, spiritual, shall we say, because our lead character, Stephen Popford, it becomes a struggle between him and his religion and the devil and demons and that sort of thing. They look very human. This is not werewolves.
Right. So we're going from the psychological thriller to the paranormal thriller of,
It did go that way, and it's going further because nobody's won yet.
Right. Right. Is this at the end a good versus evil fight, or?
Yes, okay. Absolutely.
And I'm curious, as you spent a lot of effort and time passed to produce Resurrection Runner, and then when did you realize this story can continue, and how long did it take for you to pick up the second book, The Reluctant Runner? And again, the same question for The Revenant Runner. When did you realize there's still more to tell here?
Well, when I was satisfied with the manuscript for Resurrection Runner, I knew right then that there was more. So I started on the second book probably probably about 2 months after the first book was published. There's so much work to be done in publishing in terms of ads and promotions that it becomes a full-time job.
Well, sure.
So I started it probably September of last year. And I wrote the whole thing, completed it, and I gave it to my wife to read. And she said, "We better talk."
Oh boy.
I said, "Okay."
This is a good conversation or a not so good conversation?
Oh, it's a very good conversation. We've been married a
Okay.
long, long time, and it's we're one person, and she's got a mind that's different than mine, but she's sharp and she's straight. So
All right.
she sat me down. She said, "There's this character called Helen, and it doesn't work." Well, Helen went through the whole book, so we talked for a while, and I just said okay, and I left the room. And that next day, I said, "I've been thinking about it. You're right; it doesn't work at all." So I spent the next month and a half taking Helen out.
Okay.
So anyway, it took longer than expected. It would normally take me a couple of months, but that's when I really know where I'm going with it.
Okay.
And I set goals every day for how many words I need to write.
Yeah, I want to chat about that. And I also have a question about the publishing because working with a publisher, or you're self-published, there's a lot going on here to create this book. But what I am curious about first, because I think it's important, is the process that you went through. It sounds like you were pretty darn disciplined. I can't again, maybe we can't speak to the first book, but at least with Reluctant Runner and now with Revenant Runner, what kind of discipline went into or goes into, okay, whatever, I don't know what your wife's name is, but whatever her name is, honey, I'm going into my writing room and I'm not coming out for 8 hours because I'm working, and working is writing a book. How did you go about introducing that discipline to spend the time with the characters and write the book? Because that's not easy.
I think it goes back, frankly, to when I came back to Omaha, the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and just like I said, became a greasy grind. I just enjoyed it.
Okay.
And I spent my time doing it. And I would go into my desk and I would study, and I'd study into the night, and then I'd return to the family. And it's the same now. I share an office with my wife, and actually, she's rarely here, but she's downstairs. So we have a very good relationship. She's very forgiving, and she says, "Look, this is what you need to do. Go do it."
I love it.
So
I love it.
there's no pressure to oh, come on downstairs. Nothing, none of that. So I get the bug. I sit down, and it takes discipline. You've got to say I need to do it. You've got to try to put aside all the other things that can come up. I have a tendency to get involved in training, which I need, and sometimes too much, but I can't keep up with any of it.
Mhm.
So I lose focus, and at that point, nothing's getting done.
Right.
So I've tried to separate the promotion as best as possible after the book is published, and then say, okay, I'm done with this for a while. But you really can't. But I now have to spend 4-6 hours a day on the book,
Sure.
and once going, it just happens. It just happens. Sometimes time to go to bed. That's my time.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha. The Resurrection Runner was published in July-ish 2020, give or take.
yes,
We're right in the middle there of the pandemic.
yes,
Quite frankly, we're still in the pandemic right now in end of August, and Reluctant Runner was published in June of 2021. What was your promotion of this book? I mean, how do you promote a book like this when there's constraints that are outside of our control? How'd you do it?
Well, first of all, I'm self-published. I don't have a lot of people to talk to about how to do it. And I have not been able to get to any kind of book gatherings. So not a lot of travel. So most of it's been on Amazon or Goodreads or whatever I can do to get the word out through email address, email lists, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Podcasts, yes, a great way to introduce myself to people.
As a matter of fact, it is.
Yes. So, and if you're a new author and you have a publishing house that wants you and you have a contract, I'll give you a hint. You're going to work your butt off.
Yeah.
In promoting.
Yeah.
Because it's you that's being promoted.
Sure.
It can't be done by somebody else exclusively.
Well, I would think there's lots of organizations, folks that are interested in the psychological thriller genre, the paranormal genre. And even during this period where, again, this pandemic, there's things outside of our control, but a lot of these organizations went virtual. Have you been able to perhaps, present on your books and your work in a virtual context, or is this?
In truth, I haven't made a lot of effort to do that.
Okay.
However, I'm making notes as you speak.
There you go. By the way, Robert, that's free consulting. By the way, if you need some help, we'll talk.
Okay.
So, Revenant Runners is being worked on right now. Beyond your wife, who will, support you to the end of time, and your kids and your family and your immediate friends, what are these other readers, saying about the books? What are they saying?
Well, I got my first 1 star just the other day.
Okay. We can learn from 1 star, so who cares?
Right. The person didn't say anything, so I thought, okay, well, so what?
Okay, yeah.
Give me something with that 1 star. Anyway, I don't know how to tell you. I think that the reviews I've received and the conversations I've had with people is they enjoy the read. Personally, I think Resurrection Runner, because of its single character focus, it has to develop slowly, and it does, and then it just goes crazy. But the guy's got to figure out who he is, and he's completely deceived, and until he understands what's going on, there's not a lot happening in terms of change. But truly, I wouldn't say it has a kind of a script of a noir. I would say that it goes, and you just are surprised that something just happened.
Okay.
So it's I don't know. I'm not helping myself much with this description. So.
Well, I think there's definitely an audience for the psychological thriller. There's the audience for the paranormal, and I have been blessed with having some great guests like yourself to come on and chat about it. And I'm always, at the end of the day, this is a diversion from everything else around us, because we can sit down for 30 minutes before when we get up in the morning with a cup of coffee, which is what I like to do, and just kind of read a little bit before the day starts. And, and we need that. We need to, back away from the computers and the smartphones and really just kind of read and get engrossed in the story. And I think that's definitely what you have provided to, what I would call your ideal reader, the folks that are interested in these kinds of genres. So well done. Now, I promised you that I wouldn't have a gotcha question. Well, I have a little bit of a lie. It's not a gotcha question, trust me. But if you look back, in your life's journey, you've been around the block a couple times. If you look back into where you're at today and what you're accomplishing now as a writer and novelist, what surprises you the most? We all go on journeys. I was a lousy student, and I went into IT, and I ended up like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. And I ended up going back to school in my 40s, got my master's, went into coaching. And then I literally fell into this podcasting because I was helping to solve a problem that my clients were having. They're on LinkedIn and they all want to blog, and they had no idea. Like, everybody has a New Year's resolution, Robert. I'm going to write a book, or I'm going to write a blog every week. And then they start it and they stop. And I use the podcast as a way for them to create content, because it's easier to talk about it than it is for some people than to sit down and start writing. So that's kind of was my epiphany. doing stuff I love. You're doing stuff you love now.
Well, I think you're getting to the core of it. I've been in so many different walks of life, and it was just kind of a, you say epiphany. Yes, epiphany. Can I say that? Epiphany.
Yes, you can.
Yes, I can, sort of.
It's my show. You can say anything you want.
Thank you. What surprised me the most was that I was enjoying it so much, and that I don't have any recollection of enjoying my work except for a couple of years way back when, in a company that I was involved with that was just a lot of fun. But this was something I was doing myself on my own, and it's hard work, and I just enjoy it. It's got its ups and downs, but in the end, I'm just so happy I found this path.
And, that's the best we can ask for. The best we can ask for.
Yes.
Listen, Robert, before we head out, we often like to ask our listeners for, and you've perhaps just shared this, but in the question, I asked what and how you responded, but we do ask on occasion for an insight to go. This could be an article, another book, or some type of a quote, thought. And what would be your insight to go for our listeners that you'd like to share?
Well, I think my influence is strongly focused on Solzhenitsyn and his books and his experience, and it's really what I see evolving in our own country. And my recommendation to anybody who wishes to understand what it's like from the person who went through it is to read Solzhenitsyn's books. And the last one I just reread, which is The First Circle, is really, really an eye opener. And what a wonderful writer. It's a long book, but it's certainly worth the read.
Well, we'll definitely provide not only the insight to go on the show notes, but a link to The First Circle on our show notes as well. So thank you for that insight to go.
Certainly. Thank you.
Robert, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
Well, there's my website. It's rwanderson-author.com. And I'm on Getter and Twitter and Facebook. I'm not very active. I'm kind of a lurker, but there I am.
Well, I tell you, if you're a book author, you need to be at least on Facebook, or Facebook then connects to Instagram where you can share quotes here and there. And by the way, I loved on your website, if you sign up for your blog and want to contact you, you're going to share a number of chapters with, the folks that sign up. So I love that. That's entrepreneurship right there. Is you give something away to get on a list, to have somebody on your list. So
absolutely
well done there. We will definitely provide the backlinks to the website and to your social sites as well. So looking forward to that.
Thank you, Howard.
Robert, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm glad we finally were able to connect, and it's a pleasure to have you and to kind of hear about your progress. And again, congratulations about Resurrection Runner, the Reluctant Runner, and the soon to be the Revenant Runner. And holidays are coming up. I think I know it's going to be on my reading list next to Solzhenitsyn. So thank you again,
Howard. Thank you.
All right, folks, we've just been chatting with Robert Wood Anderson. He is one of our authors on the author series on the Success Insight podcast. And, he's written these wonderful books. The first two, again, Resurrection Runner and Reluctant Runner, will provide backlinks to the books so you can check them out on his website or on Amazon. These are psychological thrillers. And if you're into this type of genre, you definitely want to pick them up and plan some time for a good read. We do appreciate Robert sharing his background and, from his days on stage with George Burns all the way to growing plots of nursery product and just his journey to become a successful novelist. It's no small feat to sit down and to perhaps that first book, and then all of a sudden there's that second and third book. So it was really a pleasure to kind of hear Robert's journey. We hope you did enjoy this episode of the author series on a Success Insight podcast. We will have this up on our Success Insight podcast page on our website, as well as on the LinkedIn and Facebook pages for Success Insight. Please do like, comment, share these episodes. We really want to know that you're getting value out of them as well. We're also on the major podcasting platforms: Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, iHeartRadio, and especially Spotify. It's actually, I just realized it's not there, but it will be soon. We're going to have a series that's devoted just to our published authors. Now, there's probably going to be some cross playlists, for some of our guests, but, specifically around being a published book author, we'll have Robert and his podcast on that playlist as well. So do go and check it out. And again, check out all the other episodes or playlists that are on Spotify. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. Be safe, take care of yourself, take care of your family. Hey, if it makes sense, practice social distancing, wear the mask. Above all, we hope you come back and visit us on the Success Insight podcast, the author series, or any of our other series within this brand. Okay, folks, take care. Have a great day, and we'll see you again soon. Bye now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.